Welcome to Corpse Club, the official podcast of DailyDead.com. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jonathan James, and I am joined today by Derek Anderson. It's the two of us again, and we're very excited to be hanging out. I can see Derek on camera, and it's been a little bit since we've had a chance to catch up with each other and with our listeners because we took a week off. We don't take a lot of time off. We try to run every single week, and and I think in year one, even during the holidays, we had episodes ahead of time. But I think now more than ever, it's time to get a little balance, right? Want to make sure that we get some rest time, some recharge time, and so we spend some time with our families for the Thanksgiving holiday. We hope that our listeners, if you celebrated Thanksgiving, had a great holiday weekend. If you don't celebrate Thanksgiving, if you're listening from another country, we hope you had a great week. But we're excited to be back. It's the two of us. And so if you listen to the last episode when it was just the two of us, we were like, well, some of other co-hosts couldn't make it. We're going to be a little loosey-goosey and we're going to make ourselves some old fashions. And so in a similar tradition, we were going to have, Tamika join us. And unfortunately, she ran into some technical issues. Tamika, we miss you. We'll see you soon. And so Derek and I are like, well, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to make old fashions and at least, like I said, start with some drinks because, like I said, we haven't seen each other in a while. We used to do this, hang out, get together for different events, have drinks afterwards. So this is our hangout time as well. So Derek, cheers to you.
Cheers. And to our listeners as well.
And to our listeners. And what are you drinking today, Derek?
Well, today finished off a bottle of Knob Creek. I believe it's 100 proof, but Knob Creek, I think, is my go-to bourbon, especially for old fashions. I really love the Knob Creek maple flavor as well for the old fashioned, but this, it goes down really smooth and it's never let me down. So
nice.
That's why I love it.
Yeah, it's,
what about yourself?
I do love, as we've mentioned before, I do love an old fashioned, I think, because it can be made so many different ways. I mean, there's a few different, cocktails, whether it's like, I think a mojito is another one. Like if you go to a bar and you order an old fashioned, like you don't necessarily know what you're going to get back if you go to a different bar. Like, if you go to like a bar that has like a really good liquor selection, like chances are they know how to make an old fashioned. So you'll get one a more traditional way. But then you also, like, if you go to like a bar that doesn't have like a huge whiskey selection, sometimes you'll get one where it's just like, like a full cup of ice and like they have all the muddled fruit in there. And if you like that kind of drink, like that's okay. I'm not going to be an elitist and say you have to drink it one way or another. I watched a fascinating, video on YouTube that was pretty extensive about like a history of old fashioned because it's one of, if not the first cocktail. And what I found that was interesting was I had always seen, when you'd go to a bar and they'd give you, like I said, a huge glass of ice and people would put soda water in it and they'd like muddle all the fruit. And I'm like, I don't like this, but I guess it is the way that at least in some circles that they were doing it in the 1970s. I wasn't around in the 70s, or at least I wasn't drinking in the 70s.
Mad Men style.
Yeah. But so people are used to getting a drink like that. And I guess they do teach some bartenders to make it that way. Feel free if you're a bartender to like I said, let me know if it's different. But as I understand, like that's the case. So I will order an old fashioned some places and I will get the like more muddled ice style. And I will get, all the way up to the, people who will serve it to me. And then one nice ice cube with like, not a lot of, fanciness to it. And, maybe just a orange peel that's twisted, but so you can go all the way from like very basic to like very complicated. Of course, you mentioned that, there's that maple Knob Creek that you have. So people who want to, change the flavor profile. Another reason I like an old fashioned is whether you put, the ingredients you put in completely change the flavor. And you can just change the bourbon out and it's completely different. So in this case, I have Woodford Double Oak. Ooh. And so I had picked that up recently. I like that quite a bit. For people that don't really like the taste of whiskey or don't drink too often, I feel like this isn't too harsh. There's not that burning flavor as you sip it down. And so you can give someone this as like a sipping whiskey, or like I said, you can put in an old fashioned as well. But yeah,
and it's the double oak that takes it to the next level. if I've heard right.
I like it a little bit better. Yeah, it has more like that
Okay.
like caramel flavor to it. So when you put that together with your other ingredients, with your bitters and your either simple syrup, or if you, like I said, you can muddle it all together, or there's some like syrups you can get to kind of mix it all together. Like I said, I think what I like about it is that there's 100 or thousands of different ways to make it, right? And we had one of our listeners too who was like, heard us last time, was like, hey, like you got to make an old fashioned with rye, like that's the way to have it. And it just goes to show that like people have things all kinds of different ways. And for our listener, we will be drinking an old fashioned at some point with rye. I've had it with rye before.
Yep.
I haven't. This is only the second time we've had old fashions here on the podcast, and I wasn't expecting. This was an impromptu, just Derek and Jonathan episode. So we will make sure to have rye for the next planned, just the two of us podcast. But anyway, what are we going to get into today? We're not going to get into
trouble.
We will get into trouble. We're not going to get into just talking about old fashions, although we could. We're going to talk about Chucky because it just wrapped up and I want to talk about it. We're going to be talking about The Walking Dead World Beyond, which is going to be wrapping up soon. And hear what Derek has to say about that. Ghostbusters Afterlife and Venom, Let There Be Carnage. So we're going to catch up on those. I'm going to just kick things off and talk a little bit about Chucky because this is, easily one of my highlights for the year in terms of, horror output. It's one of the best, whether it's, horror TV or movies or video games out of any medium. It's one of the best releases, hands down. If you're just okay with Chucky and you've seen a couple of the movies, it's fine. If you've seen them all and you're a diehard fan, it's fine. If this is your first introduction to Chucky, it's fine. Like, no matter how you're coming at this, there should be something for you to like. It's just, it's hard to overstate what an accomplishment this is because we haven't really seen this, with some of the other slashers or some of the other, horror icons being able to kind of transition. And I know we've talked about this before, but like Chucky's awesome in that it's one of the only franchises that just continues the same canon from the movies, movie to movie to movie. Of course, we have the reboot, which we don't count there, but it's been great to see like Curse and Cult follow the same story, bring back older characters. And we're seeing the same thing on the TV show. So it's really, really cool. It follows, Jake Wheeler, who is this, teen we're introduced to and a cast of other characters from his school and from his family. And they do such a good job building them up that we don't, care that we don't spend a lot of time with some of the older characters that we know and love until later in the show. And, it's like I said, it's such a great mix of old and new. And, I instantly fell in love with it and it just kept getting better. Derek, I know you've seen a little bit of it so far. What have you thought?
I've really enjoyed it so far. Like you said, it's a really interesting way to bridge kind of a new story because I think a lot of people, like longtime listeners, might know that my sister and I, when my uncle was babysitting us, and this was, in the mid 90s, and we were super young, and he put on Chucky as like when he was babysitting us as a way to keep us occupied or scare the crap out of us. And so I remember being like traumatized by Chucky as a kid. But of course, there's a lot of people that are completely new to Chucky. And I think it's such a great like gateway horror experience for a lot of people coming into this. And now because it's telling this new story, but then it's kind of slowly, gradually introducing the characters from the previous movies in a way that is accessible to new viewers, but also very fun for longtime fans of the franchise. And I just think it's such a great template and blueprint to do that. And it wouldn't have worked if like the initial story wasn't interesting, but it's so captivating right away that I think it just pulls everybody in. And now they have a season 2 coming. So I think it totally worked out. And it's a great example that you can do this with horror icons. Like I would love to see this whole blueprint used for like, it'd be really interesting to see it used for like Michael Myers or something like that. Like this new trilogy that we have with the Halloween films. What if that had been a TV series and we got to see all those storylines play out over multiple seasons. But I'm glad that Chucky took this route.
Yeah. There's a couple things that set this up for success. I mean, you kind of like look at some of the other, characters and their stories. I mean, I guess I think to like Doctor Who, and one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons that it's lasted for as long as it has, and that people find it so interesting, is because it has the concept of regeneration. And so you see a doctor the same character who then will regenerate into these new actors. And it was, it was a basic concept, but it allowed the show to kind of continue to live on, and then it became more and more part of the story. And in Cult of Chucky, we see that Charles Lee Ray has the ability to like splinter himself. And so it's not just him in one doll, it can be him in multiple dolls. And that really expanded what they can do at the show because, as we see, they're not just going after a single Chucky. It does allow you to do away with one. And as long as you have a mechanism for bringing him back or having multiple Chuckies, there's kind of an endless, potentially an endless supply for the show. And that does make it so that you can really have these moments where, your heroes can really fight back and, think they exterminated Chucky, then you can come back in the next episode. And that mechanism allows them to do a lot of fun things. Obviously, they have to be careful with how much they use it and how they use it, but they've used it very effectively throughout the first season.
Yeah, it's brilliant because it wasn't like the Good Guys doll was a super limited edition toy when it initially came out in the universe of the movies. It was like the Furbies of its generation where there was so much mass production. It was like the Turbo Man doll. Like, yes, it was in high demand, but there was enough of them exist out in the world where you can continue to tell new stories. And it's almost like an anthology story to some extent because you're like, well, this is this Chucky doll in this part of the world. And so it's a brilliant like move that Don Mancini did to take it in that direction. And I feel like it just makes endless opportunities. Like, it gives Chucky a one-up on other slasher icons because it has this reasonable reason why he can keep existing without being like, well, shouldn't he have died like 10 times by now? It's like, he has kind of that Freddy Krueger edge where like, the dream world gives Freddy that edge and Chucky has this other thing that gives him that edge. And so it's really fun to follow that and kind of really opens that world up too.
Yeah. It was, like I said, it was super helpful that they have this. And I don't think the show in the same way wouldn't have been possible. And, and I have to give a lot of credit to the younger cast. The casting decisions were excellent in who they chose. And everyone does such a great job in their role. They're believable. So, in the roles of, Jake, Devin, Lexi, and Junior, like, you kind of go in and out in feeling about these characters in different, like, you have different feelings about these characters throughout. And so I think they do a great job of showing them as teens who are, encountering something traumatic and who are all somewhat flawed, because we all are, right? Everybody has ups and downs, good aspects and bad aspects. And so to see how some of these characters change, and that characters that maybe were neutral about, you hate by the end, maybe characters that you loved, you hated, loved, and that they were able to pull it off in such a way that I really care about what happens to, these characters in the next season, is a testament to how much time and care went into multiple aspects of this. Cause I always talk about, right, it's not just the writing, it's not just the directing, it's casting, it's the actors, it's everything. It's the effects and the puppeteer team for Chucky. And, it's just been so great to see all of it come together so well.
Yeah. It's really cool. And I love the fact that it's like, they're setting it in a school with, believable characters, and it's very inclusive and it's very representative. And I feel like it's just, I don't know, it feels so natural, just the way that they're telling that story, and the way you get the home life, and then also the school. Like there's always something happening. There's so many great characters to tap into, whether it's the teachers or the students. And like it kind of gave me a little bit too of like the first 2 seasons of the Scream TV series, where it's in the small town and you had John Carna's character doing the podcast, and it really, and I love that setup. And I feel like they've kind of tapped into that in its own way in this show, where it's such a great backdrop for, it would have been interesting without Chucky, and to then throw Chucky into that mix makes it that much more interesting, where it's like, oh, okay, it's a great cast of characters, and then you have Chucky, and now stuff's really happening, and it's just a lot of fun to watch. And I'm so glad that they got a second season renewal, because I feel like too often we see a show that really strikes a lot of chords with people and it gets canceled for whatever reason. And I'm just so glad that Sci-Fi and USA Network are like seeing the reactions, the positive reactions out there, and they're doubling down on it and saying like, go and tell more stories. And I just can't wait to see where they go with it.
Yeah. And without giving too many spoilers away, I mean, it's obvious, right? Some of this stuff. So like I said, I don't like to spoil exact plot details, but like I said, it's kind of obvious if there's a second season, like things continue. But like it would have been, they made it in a way like they knew, or they hoped that they were getting a season 2, because it's not a definitive wrap up. Like if they didn't get a second season, they were screwed a little bit. I think they were very confident. I think they, probably knew they were going to get, it was very likely they were going to get that second season pickup. And something else too I wanted to mention is like, is Chucky the doll himself. Like he looks great. Like Tony Gardner and the team, just like they did such an excellent job. Like it's one of the best Chucky designs that we've seen, but also from like a technological perspective, like the way he emotes, the way he moves, like it's probably some of the best that we've seen. And certainly, I think there was like a little bit of a phase of like, maybe like redefining how Chucky would look and work, and maybe also to like figuring out how he lived in a CG world versus what was practical and all that. When we were looking at like Curse of Chucky, they refined that much further in Cult. But it seems like they perfected it in the TV show, because like I said, I mean, he's great. Chucky really emotes in a way that like is super believable. I mean, it's always movie magic. But here it's like I said, they just seem to take everything to another level. It's, and like I said, you can tell there's more of a budget behind it and how much people care about it. And, it's just really nice when you can see something special like this. It just all comes together.
Yeah, it's and I think that's a testament too to Don Mancini kind of guiding it for so long and being a part of it for such a long time. And then familiar faces from the past coming back. I mean, Jennifer Tilly is just such a driving force in this entire franchise. So I'm so glad that they're finding ways to bring back not only Chucky, but these other characters who've become iconic in their own right. And it's kind of, we've seen that a lot in like, obviously with Halloween and certain other horror movies where they bring back characters from the past. But I think Chucky's done it so consistently and in a way where you don't have like 5 alternate timelines, which can be fun, but it gets a little confusing over time. Like this one, it's so organized. Like I feel like they never painted themselves in a corner they couldn't get out of without it making sense, or without it not making sense to fans. So I feel like it's always been a very thoughtful franchise in a lot of ways. And it's kind of an anomaly to really kind of span that many decades and still be this kind of streamlined franchise at this point. So I'm glad that Chucky survived his transition to TV.
Yeah. And it's so strange because I always liked the Chucky movies, but like when Curse came out and like by the time Cult came out, I'm like, I think I love this franchise. Like I don't just like it. Like I love it. And if you've been on board, this is your favorite franchise since the beginning, or like since 3 or whatever, like that's fine. Like that's awesome. But like I liked them, but I didn't love them. And then the more like I kept watching them, and then as we started seeing more of these sequels, I'm like, they're just keeping the story going. It's getting better and better. I guess when it got back to more of its horror roots, I started, like I said, really getting into it more. And now with the TV show, like they've cemented Chucky as like one of the greatest Universal monsters. Like it's unbelievable. And like there is a nod in the finale, more than a nod. Like it's a pretty big element, but to the Universal monsters. But like Chucky is a Universal monster. He may not have started there with the first Child's Play, which is MGM, but ever since Child's Play 2, Universal's been the home, and certainly through the. And for the TV series, which is, on USA and Sci-Fi, which is owned by NBC Universal. And so, having Chucky is like at least like in the modern day, like the longest running like Universal monster. Like it's crazy. And I'm so happy for everybody involved. It's just like I said, to me, it's just it's wonderful. And I think on top of it too, and I mentioned it in the previous episode, I know a lot of people have talked about it, but I think including the LGBTQ themes in the show has just also helped take it to another level, where it's a show that's inclusive. It's a show, and you want to talk about, kind of, updating, in some cases to the times or for new audiences. Like this feels like now, it feels relevant and feels like stories that, younger people and people of all ages, but specifically can appeal to younger people who are looking for different types of diverse stories with diverse casts and people from different backgrounds. And so I think they do an excellent job of weaving that in, of making it an essential part of the story, which is, like I said, where we see these characters' journeys and these young characters who are just starting to learn more about themselves. And then, like I said, and so certainly, from that aspect, it's been incredible to see, like I said, this representative story, because I mean, we know that Don Mancini is that kind of person. And even outside of the LGBTQ side of things, there is like, you see like Tony Gardner and the Puppeteers are like credited as cast members. If you look at the credits for Chucky, which is, unfortunately, people in the special effects makeup business, people who are the puppeteers, they kind of get left out, and they are creating the monster. You don't sometimes have a single person, have a Boris Karloff or a Lon Chaney. In some cases, it may take a team of people to bring this monster for life. And so to see people like that getting credit and getting the spotlight, like I said, I just all around, it's been great. And I can't recommend it enough. It is, it's wrapped up, of course, because I mentioned I saw the finale, and so you could catch it. There's probably on VOD and or on demand rather. It's on VOD if you want to like buy it through Amazon, but you can also watch it through Peacock. It just they just announced that season 1 came to Peacock. So if you still have it because you were watching Halloween Kills, or you still are watching Halloween Kills because you watch it every day on Peacock, I'm sure somebody does, then you can also watch Chucky season 1.
Nice. Yeah, it's definitely readily available. So I think it's going to be on a lot of favorite lists this year in the horror community, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all the reactions. I guess I'll just be in a few weeks from this recording. Yeah,
it'll be on one person's favorite list. Wink. It's always a good news. The good thing, at least the good thing about the one thing that I get now, because I don't write a lot for Daily Dead. I have such an incredible team, and and so everybody writes better than me. And so I'd rather read
some credit.
Well, I'd rather read what all of you are writing and creating. But the one thing I do is I these days is I do run the first favorite of the year article. So it is some pressure because I have to make sure that I've seen some things which I may need to catch up on, but also it means that I can get out of the gate with my picks. So I can throw Chucky and I'll be like, yeah, I was the first.
Yeah, and then we'll all look like we just copied you. So that's always fun, because traditionally I go last.
You do, yeah.
So I have to make sure I have some more obscure picks, because otherwise it just looks like I copied everybody. But then again, I do watch like a lot of CW shows, which not everyone on our team watches. So I guess that alone kind of gives me a little more of an edge in that category. So
yeah, we always do things a little bit different. I mean, I know a lot of people do top 10 movies lists, but as I've mentioned before, and I mentioned in the intro of our favorites when we do it, I always struggled with that. It's like, is it a best movie of the year, but I didn't necessarily like it. Like it's a great movie. I recognize it's well made, but do I like it? You know, so I'd notice that some things that I really enjoyed would not necessarily make a top list. And it was driving me nuts. So I'm like, well, let's just do favorites. Like, let's talk about like what we enjoyed throughout the year. And if it's a movie, great. TV, great. Video games, you know, did you buy a collectible you love? Talk about it. And so our favorites of the year will be starting in 3 or 4 weeks. And so you'll get to hear from most of the Daily Dead team and the Corpse Club hosts, and we'll be telling you about our favorites. And we'll be talking about some of them as well as we get closer to 2022. That sounds so weird. I literally, as I was mentioning that, looked at the clock and the calendar because I can't fathom that we're in 2022. It sounds, I don't know why 2020, maybe because it was easier to say like 2020 vision, but like my brain doesn't want to say 2022. It's like, that seems like it's 2 years extra, but it's like too far into the future. Like we shouldn't be there yet.
Yeah, it sounds way more futuristic, just the way it rolls off the tongue. And it sounds more like, I don't know, like some dystopian sci-fi movie setting or something where you're like, oh, that's so far in the future, and here we are.
Yeah, and part of it is I've also been in this bubble for like way too long. So I'm like, I've been in here for almost 2 years.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah, I'm not, what do you call it? I'm not going to crack. It's not going to be what do you call it? It's not going to be an overlooked situation.
Although you do have if I remember right, one of the Shining cardigan sweaters or something like that. No, it's a ski mask, I think. The Shining carpet pattern.
Yeah, I do. I didn't buy it for myself, and I do appreciate the gift, but I just want to let people know that my obsession with The Shining does not extend to me buying for myself a ski mask that has the pattern, but my family did. I can't remember now if it was, I got two things. I got a Shining carpet pattern sweater from Mondo, and there was also, like I said, there was the ski mask, and my parents got me one and Christy got me the other, and I can't remember, I'm sorry, which one got me which, but I will wear it when I go like to like shovel snow or use a snow blower. It's a very the people are like, it's a collector's item. Like, you shouldn't be. I need to go out and not what do you call it? Not die from frostbite. So it's wonderful to keep me from getting like windburn or like, you know, my face freezing. So I wear it out to snow blow, and my neighbors always are like, "What the hell is wrong with this guy?"
Well, when you live where you do or where I do, it's like it's comfort over collectible. It's survival mode in the winter. So
yeah, and I'm gonna curse myself here, but we haven't had a bad winter in like 2 or 3 years. I mean, global warming and all that, but like we used to get like 6 or 8 feet of snow at one time, and that hasn't happened in years. So I don't know if we're gonna get it this year, but I haven't. It's been a while since I've had to do it.
The nor'easters that Stephen King likes to write about.
Yeah, what we have is they call it lake effect snow because we live right next to Lake Erie. And so the wind will pick up the snow from the lake that's on top of it, and then it will dump it on the nearby homes. So we get the normal snow, and that might be like 2 to 3 feet, but we can also get like 4 feet of snow on top of that is just pulled from the lake and then onto our homes.
So it's even more winter joy for you to deal with.
Yeah, but like I said, it's been a little bit. It's been okay. I mean, I'd rather have no global warming, and I'd rather have, you know, more snow. But it is what it is.
Yeah, it's good weather to watch The Thing.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, actually, and something I got to watch, which I'll take us off topic for a minute, but I got the Krampus. What's called like the naughty cut.
The naughty cut.
Yeah, I bought that the other day, and I'm like, I need this. Yep. And it's like, I don't know if it was under the radar. I don't know what term to use here, but like, I don't know. I don't even, maybe because it didn't make, you know, the cover of the New York Times, I'm upset. I don't know. Maybe I just feel like it should have gotten more publicity. I'm like, oh my God, like I'm so excited that it got the extra. I mean, it's only like 4 extra minutes, but I haven't seen it. So, but I was excited at the thought that it just seemed like there was just like a little more there. Like this could have pushed into R-rated territory, and I think it would have been fine in it. I understand why they shot for PG-13. But yeah, I'm really excited to see it. And, you know, I have a feeling this will be more of the definitive cut because this was Mike Dougherty's original cut before he had to make some edits to keep the PG-13 as I understand it. So kind of like with Blade Runner and like Ridley Scott's, you know, Ultimate Edition that became the de facto version that people would watch. I have a feeling that this is going to be the one that sticks around.
I'm really excited to watch it too. I watched Krampus with my family and out last winter. And that was the first time I had seen it like in 5 or 6 years. So it was such a fun, like it really holds up well, like any Mike Dougherty movie, like Trick or Treat, of course. And then Krampus, he just seems to do such a great job of capturing the horror of the holidays and having, it's kind of like Christmas Vacation, but then if you threw Krampus in there, it's just such a great comedy on its own legs. And then there's so much great horror in there as well. So I'm really excited for that. I'm really excited for the 4K version of it visually. I think will be really interesting, and the sound engineering of it, like the Dolby mix and everything like that. Because there's so many, like when Krampus is like on the rooftops and you can hear him, if you have like a surround sound setup, like that sound design is so punishing and good.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, I'm super excited.
Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see. I have it as well. I haven't watched it. But like between that and the extended cut of Halloween Kills that we're getting, is just a lot of it, like even the smallest amount of footage, like with those two movies, I'm so excited to dig into.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where I said I want to see Halloween Kills again, but again, now there's so many things competing for my time. Right. I may let one of the other corpse clubbers invest their time, and they can let me know. They're like, you have to watch this. Well,
the thing with the extended cut for Halloween Kills is that alternate ending, because
I know,
I'm guessing they can't. What I'm really curious is it going to be just like a hair's difference as far as what the alternate ending is, or was it like a completely different direction that they were going to go for the sequel? And like, did somebody else die? Did something happen that would have changed the whole trajectory of the third movie? And they said, no, we're actually going to go this way. I'm just really curious what that's going to look like. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of discussion about it right away.
Yeah, well, I've mentioned multiple times, because I'll keep saying it. I'm sure some people on Twitter have noted this, but I haven't seen a lot of people mention this. So that's why I keep saying it. Like, we're going to look back at like the 2021 movies and say that, you know, the strategy apparently was to keep them short because you wanted to maximize your theater count. Because there's a lot of movies to me that appear like they're on fast forward and they've been trimmed down. Halloween Kills, Candyman, a movie we'll be talking about later this podcast. They just seem like they're highlight reels, and I understand the business of it. I'm not complaining about it. I think as a fan, we want more, understanding that we're in a pandemic, understanding the business of making movies, and that you want to get it out there. You know, I'm okay with, like, we're going to get this shorter version out there. We're going to release this extended or alternate cut, which may, as I mentioned, kind of with Krampus, for Halloween Kills, this also may become the de facto cut moving forward. May have been the director's intended cut. I don't know how many more minutes it is. And like I said, and we may start seeing some of this stuff with more and more releases from this year.
Yeah, I hope so, because like you said, I feel like, I guess on one level it's refreshing, because I feel like run times for movies have generally gotten longer, especially with like superhero movies and sci-fi movies, where you're getting like 2.5 hours is like the new norm. And you're kind of like, okay, that's more of a commitment, like, you know, when you're planning that out. And it's a little different during COVID, because not everyone is going to see movies right now in theaters, but then we're waiting for digital. But even then it's like, that's a time commitment. So on one hand, I kind of, it's kind of like, you almost feel like, okay, 1.5 hours, I can do that, no problem. But then when you watch the movie, you're almost kind of used to seeing a more complete story nowadays too. So I'm really curious what some of these longer cuts look like you mentioned, because I think sometimes it is like just extra stuff that didn't need to be in there, and other times it really enhances it. Like one of my favorite movies, 2004's King Arthur by Antoine Fuqua. I bought the director's cut in a Best Buy in 2005 or 2004, and I watched the director's cut like 10 times before I even saw the theatrical cut on like TV. And it's a completely, like, the director's cut is so much better. There's so many character moments that make that movie 10 times better. And so whenever I say like that's my favorite movie, I have to say director's cut, because they took out so much in the theatrical version or the TV version that it doesn't even hit the same dramatic notes. And so I'm like, I'll watch the director's cut any day over the standard edition. And so I'm curious what some of these versions will look like for, Halloween Kills, and if it's just like more of a marketing thing. I guess we'll find out soon enough.
Yeah, we will. But yeah, let's change topics for a minute. And, I know you've been keeping up with The Walking Dead quite a bit. We have, the main Walking Dead TV series. We have Fear of the Walking Dead. We have The Walking Dead World Beyond. And World Beyond is, a limited series. I think we knew from the beginning there was going to be 2 seasons. It's doing a lot of interesting things in terms of the story it's trying to tell, the characters it's introducing, and where it's seemingly taking us in terms of how it expands the overall Walking Dead universe. I think one of the big things for our listeners to kind of understand is that if you haven't caught up on The Walking Dead in a little bit, and maybe you just watched the main series or a little bit of Fear the Walking Dead, like, there's a lot more Walking Dead coming. There's the anthologies, TV series. There's Daryl and Carol TV series. There is 3 movies that are going to feature Andrew Lincoln and Denai Guerrera. And so we have a lot more Walking Dead to go, and they're going to continue to build that world. I think one of the themes of Robert Kirkman's comic book series was a larger world. They even noted or named one of the comic book story arcs a larger world. And we kind of notice, right? It starts off as a small story with a small group of survivors. And as they keep moving, things get bigger, and things get bigger. So then we go to, the prison, meet some more people, find Woodbury, go to Alexandria, start finding these other communities. Then you expand more and more as this series, comic book series, reaches its conclusion. And so the TV show is doing some of that, and maybe some more, where they're building up this much bigger world where there are these communities that are still surviving, even though zombies have taken over. So anyway, Derek, I know you've been keeping up on season 2. So what have you thought?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I think the series as a whole. So when they announced this initially a few years ago, they said it would be 2 seasons. So kind of like a limited series right off the bat. And so we're on the verge of the series finale. The final episode, as of this recording, will air in a few days on Sunday night. And it's been really interesting to kind of see this journey. It kind of started, it started following a group of younger, like teenage characters who basically leave their colony to go find two of the sisters have a dad who's at another colony. And it's all part of this civic republic, which we've seen on the regular Walking Dead series and the comic books as like the Commonwealth, which is basically this giant city that is like this kind of like an oasis in the apocalyptic wasteland, but it's really hard to get into. And the military, the Civic Republic military, or the CRM, they fly around in these helicopters with these rings on it, and they're very mysterious. And you kind of have a feeling that maybe they're not the greatest people, but they're also providing this oasis for a lot of people to survive. So they're trying to provide this civilization for the future. But not everyone's allowed in, is kind of the deal. So we see these characters, these younger characters, kind of go across the country or at least the Northeast part of the United States in the first season. And the second season has been more in this like CRM research facility where their dad is like a research scientist, where he's working with other scientists to try and figure out a cure, like an actual way to stop the dead from walking, which in their minds is basically the only way they're ever going to survive or outlast the zombie apocalypse, is if they find a way to keep zombies from basically eating people, keep them from getting up and walking. So like if you die, you would actually stay dead. If they could figure out a way to give people like something that would prevent them from coming back from the dead. So that's what's going on there. But as we learn throughout the second season, the CRM doesn't quite operate to great moral standards, and they have a lot of shady stuff going on, and it's kind of like their way or the highway. So if you're another major civilization, they might want to wipe you out because they want to have all the resources to keep their people alive. And so therein lies the conflict. So there's been a lot of really interesting kind of looks behind the scenes of what's going on in the CRM research facility, which is kind of this extension of the Commonwealth that we've seen on The Walking Dead. And it's been like a lot of espionage. It's less of like zombies out in the wilderness, which we've seen for, more than 10 seasons on The Walking Dead. This is more like what's going on in the research facilities where they're testing on zombies. What are the moral, ethical standards in these facilities? And then ultimately, is this civilization actually like an evil corporation that's trying to take over the world? So it's been really interesting. I think the series as a whole has had some highs and lows, but I think they've hit their stride this season. And there's been a lot of higher stakes with the characters, a lot of decisions that have had to been made that they have to live with for better or worse. And it's been pretty fast paced all season long. And I mean, when you only have 2 seasons to tell your story, there's really no time for a lot of filler. So I feel like in the second season, when they realized at some point probably that they didn't have a third season, they're like, okay, we got to bring everything to a head and see what happens. So and also as just a minor spoiler warning, if you don't want to know anything about how it's connecting to the Walking Dead series, we've seen Pollyanna McIntosh's character Jadis as a major character in the second season. She is, the last time we saw her, also spoiler warning if you're not caught up on The Walking Dead, she saved Rick Grimes from a certain death after a bridge exploded, and she took him into a Civic Republic helicopter. And basically, and it's the first time I've really seen Rick referenced in World Beyond, or like to really any extent. I mean, Fear the Walking Dead, you have Morgan, but Rick isn't really talked about. But Jadis basically says, I gave the CRM an asset that was very valuable to them, and in exchange for that, I'm now working for them, and I'm one of their top military personnel who makes sure that the integrity of the military is kept intact. So she basically is working for the CRM now, and she's like the main villain of the second season, which is really interesting. And she always talks about like how she lived in a junkyard and how that didn't work out, and how basically the CRM, even though they're not a perfect civilization, they are the safest option for humanity's survival. So she really believes in what she's doing. And Pollyanna is such a great actor. So it's been awesome to see her come back and have this really juicy role. And it's completely different than kind of how we saw her in the Walking Dead series. So I'm curious how everything's going to come into play in the final episode. I feel like, I know there's been some teases from the Walking Dead community where like maybe something big might happen in the final episode that will connect it a little bit more to the main Walking Dead series. So I'm really curious about that, but it's been really interesting. And I feel like if you stuck with it, I think you got rewarded pretty well this season.
Yeah, I mean, COVID definitely impacted the Walking Dead movie a little bit, but like, we have a full theatrical movie coming up soon. Like I said, starring, Andrew Lincoln. And so really curious to see where they take the series. I have some things I want to talk about. and it's so comic book spoilery right now that I'm just we're gonna save it for another conversation, because I know a lot of our readers, or a lot of our listeners rather, probably not read the comic book series all the way through, and that's okay. I highly recommend the comic book series. I think it's one of the best comic book series ever written, and I prefer it to the show. I like the show, but I prefer the comic book series and where they went with the characters. And I'm very excited because it seems like some of the things here are setting up some of the events that we'll see later in the comic book series. They always do what they call like remixing. So I can almost see like they've added some new elements and some new characters and things, but it still kind of gets us to the same endpoint, even if it's not the same path there.
Yeah, I think that's definitely been kind of their playbook, even on the regular Walking Dead series for many seasons. Actually, pretty much since the beginning, is like, okay, we're going to get from point A to point B, but all this other stuff is going to happen a little bit differently, and different characters will survive and die and stuff like that. But it's been really interesting to kind of see what a more, I guess, like what civilization looks like this season, where you're in like this kind of sterile research facility. It feels almost a little more Resident Evil-y in that sense, like from the Alice movies, and then kind of see like the experiments. And so you're not necessarily out in the wilderness like we've been so many other seasons, but it's been really interesting. And I feel like at the same time, trying to tie into the regular Walking Dead series, they've done really good job of sticking with the main young cast that we followed since the beginning. And they've had like, each character has had a complete arc as far as going through stuff and changing as a person. And I don't always agree with some of the decisions the characters make, or sometimes you scratch your head a little bit, but I think it's, that's life itself. And, sometimes stuff doesn't go according to plan. And I feel like they've tried to kind of show a coming of age story in there as well. And I think they've done a really good job of having a lot of also good inclusiveness and representation in that sense. And really kind of like with Chucky, even though it's a post-apocalypse story, it's a story for everyone. And I feel like a lot of different people can see themselves in these characters. And I feel it's something that I know people maybe had zombie burnout, for several years now, because it's just been so much of it. But I feel like this is a show that, 10 years from now or something like that, like people could watch it and not, and with 2 seasons, you're not as intimidated, like with, 12 seasons of a show or something like that. I feel like this is something that people could revisit and kind of really enjoy, in hindsight. So, but yeah, in the meantime, I think it should, if it does connect with the Walking Dead, like I think there's an outside chance that they might do something really, really big in this final episode. I think it's going to get a lot more eyes on it in this final episode. So I'm curious to see where they go.
We'll find out soon, in a week.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're going to change topics for a bit, and it's a topic I don't have much to say about because I haven't been able to see it. And so that is Ghostbusters Afterlife. But I think we're going to get more of this as time continues, which is, some people are going to see movies at different times than other people. There's going to be so many movies and TV release that you're not going to be able to catch up with it. I would love to have seen Ghostbusters and a number of other movies, but because they're not releasing them day and date, I do have to wait the 60 days. So, I'm sure there are a lot of other people who are in the same boat as I am. And so we'll tread lightly on spoilers, but I wanted to, hear from you, Derek, like, what did you think of Ghostbusters? There's no shortage of opinions when it comes to Ghostbusters and Ghostbuster fandom. And I think in some cases, that is the fandom side of it. And how toxic it has become has kind of dominated conversation. But that being said, we got a brand new Ghostbusters movie with, much of the original cast. And I know a lot of people are excited about it. I've seen some reactions on social media, and it seems that some people are, people are all over the place with it. Some people are like, it's great, and it's a great continuation of these characters that we know and love. Some other people I know felt it was too much product, and this was kind of like leaning into fandom too much. And of course, I haven't seen it, so I can't give my opinion. But I want to get your take, Derek. What do you think? And would you recommend it?
I definitely would. I had a blast with it. I saw it in IMAX, and the sound design was just amazing. But and I'm someone who, I enjoy the previous Ghostbusters movies, including the 2016 film. I had a lot of fun with that movie. I understand it was very different probably than people expected as far as the continuation of the Ghostbusters story itself. And I feel like this one is probably more what people had expected, as far as it's kind of like a reboot, but it's also a sequel. But that being said, so I've enjoyed every Ghostbusters film. This one I had a blast with. I think it did exactly what it needed to, as far as kind of like Chucky. I mean, it tells this new story with new characters that are new to this franchise, and then it brings back some of the original characters in a way that makes sense, in a way that moves the story forward. So it's not just fan service. I mean, obviously it's Ghostbusters. There's going to be a lot of product. I mean, there's going to be tons of toys, like any movie like this. There's going to be a lot of product regardless. So, I mean, you might as well have fun with it, and you might as well write it into the story in a way that makes sense. And I think they do that. There's kind of like a Stranger Things vibe here. And I know that not just because Finn Wolfhard's in it, but just the way the story is told with this kind of nostalgic sense, but it's also a very new story. And I feel like the setting is very fresh. It's in like this small isolated town rather than in Manhattan. So that alone kind of sets it apart from the other Ghostbusters movies. And I think it's exactly what the franchise needed in setting it up in a new way, but also paying respect to the characters of the previous films. And ultimately it's a love letter and really an ode of respect to Harold Ramis. And I think they did. I think that was their top priority. After watching the movie, I think that was the top priority, and they really knocked that out of the park. And again, not in a way that's just like fan service. It really makes sense for the story. I think as time has gone on, everyone involved with that franchise has realized how important Harold was to so many people, and inside and outside of the Ghostbusters community, and how brilliant he was as a filmmaker and a writer, and obviously as a character in these movies. And I think they did such a great job honoring him. And I feel like that's why everyone came back together, was ultimately to pay respect to him. And now that they've done that, they've really left the franchise in an interesting spot for the future. And regardless of what they do in the future, I think they've put in a solid entry into the franchise, and it's just a lot of fun. So, I mean, I think it appeals to hardcore fans and casual fans, which ultimately, when so much time has gone by, I think that's what you have to do with a movie like this. And in our theater, we had, we were masked up in the theater, and there's times where people cheered, and that so rarely happens. Like, I always kind of laugh when reviews say that you'll stand up and cheer, but I think people actually did that for this movie. So it was really cool to be in that atmosphere and this kind of celebratory vibe that the whole movie had. And I love Paul Rudd. So, I mean, he's a major fixture in the story as well. And McKenna Grace is awesome. And so I think there's just a lot of great characters. And I think if you just go into it, keep your, obviously Ghostbusters, there's been a lot of hard discussions. And I feel like if you just leave all of that outside and just go in and try and enjoy a movie, you'll have a good time. So that's something that I came away from it as. And now I've liked every single movie in the franchise. So I've liked the last two, and hopefully we'll like future ones as well.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, just because of the nature of the internet machine, like, I know what happens. So I couldn't get away from spoilers. I've muted certain movies and topics these days because I'm just like, it started after I saw some spoilers from Ghostbusters. I'm like, really? I'm like, it just came out. And I was like, I thought I was safe.
Yeah.
The reason why there's some other movies, which I'm not going to name, but like there's a movie that like its entire fandom, like didn't spoil it for weeks. I'm like, how did everybody hold the line on this movie? I'm not going to talk about what the movie is, but like, because it's still not getting spoiled that much. I'm like, really? Like, no one's really spoiling this? And I'm like, and again, I'm sure there are some big tweets. I'm sure thousands of people have been spoiled about movie X, but like, there's a movie that's already come out and people didn't spoil it. And so like, I saw it like months after, or like a month after release. And I'm like, how did nobody talk about this? But then Ghostbusters was like all over the place. And we know we're going to see that for like Spider-Man and for some of the others.
Oh yeah.
I think I'll provide some feedback for this, I guess, because I mean, I haven't seen it, but that'll segue into our next movie. I think that over at least over the last like 5 years, I've softened my stance on a lot of movies. Like, I used to be a lot pickier, and I used to like still like respectful and like understandable, but like I would like really pick at like some of the movies. Like, I don't know, like we'll see if it's a comic book movie or a franchise movie. Maybe if it was like Spectre for the Bond movies, where I was like, oh, like I hate this movie. And, and then like these days, like we're in a pandemic, like my life is completely different than it was 5 years ago. I got bigger things to worry about than whether, the next Ghostbusters movie is, great or terrible or somewhere in the middle. And if there's something that I don't like completely, and the thing too is I think perspective, and I love being able to hear from so many people on the Corpse Club team. I love being able to read from such a diverse group of writers, of entertainment journalists. And I think all of that perspective has really kind of helped me, in some ways kind of recontextualize, how I view movies in a very positive way. And it's like, taking a step and realizing, hey, this movie, and I think also then too, like, as you get older, hopefully, right? And you realize the process that goes into making a movie and what kind of alchemy it really is, but also how hard people really work on it. It's hard for me to review movies these days, especially if I were to see something I didn't personally like, because maybe it didn't work for me, but maybe I was having an off day. Maybe it wasn't made for me. Maybe it was made for a different age group, a different ethnicity, whatever the case may be. Maybe it wasn't made for me, and so I didn't connect with it. Does that mean I should give it a bad review? No, but so frequently we see that. And so, I think the thing with Ghostbusters is it's like, I'm fine if it's fine. I'm like, well, it was good. Like, that's okay. It doesn't have to be great. And so that leads us into Venom, Let There Be Carnage. And I was super excited to see this. And we'll talk about a bunch of details. And it's been out for a little bit. It was in theaters and just hit VOD. So I definitely want to touch upon spoilers. And I think just getting it out of the way, what I've said is like, this movie wasn't a great movie by any stretch of the imagination. But like, and again, for me, but like 12-year-old Jonathan would absolutely love this movie. And I found this movie highly entertaining. And I think for what they were looking to achieve, they hit what the vibe that they were going for. They made some very interesting choices. And in some cases, they kind of went against the Marvel and DC route. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be exactly Marvel and DC, right? And So yeah, I know you saw it. So I'll kind of let you talk about it a little bit. We'll go back and forth and see where we wind up.
Yeah, yeah. This was. I know it's time is such a whirlwind these days. It feels like it was a year ago when I saw this. It feels like it was 2 weeks ago. But yeah, like you, it was. I thought it was a lot of fun. I mean, definitely. It's not going to be talked about as much as an Avengers movie, or it won't maybe have the staying power of some of these other superhero movies. But I think it's a fun movie. Like and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the thing obviously with Spider-Man, especially this kind of Spider-Man Rogues Gallery that Sony Pictures is doing with like the Morbius movie, and they're doing all these characters from the Spider-Man universe. I think it's interesting the way their tone is different than the Marvel or even DC movies. It feels like they're a little more, I don't know, they're just their own thing a little bit more. And this one was very anticipated for the character of Carnage, obviously one of the more ruthless villains in comic books. I think a lot of people would agree on. I remember being introduced to the character in that great 90s Spider-Man animated series that had so many great characters. And even though it was like a cartoon, Carnage, it was so terrifying to me, even more so than Venom. And it's like when Spider-Man has to team up with Venom to take down Carnage, like to take down another character, that they're like an evil character. So now with the comic books, of course, Carnage has been really a really ruthless and sadistic, and he kind of, like, I always think of him as like one level up. Like villains, especially nowadays, they try to make them a little more relatable, and like you can kind of see where they're coming from to an extent sometimes, like if the writers are trying to get you to empathize with them a little bit, but ultimately you don't agree with what they're doing. But Carnage always just seemed like he was like, because he was a serial killer and then became Carnage, it was just so, he just seemed that much more evil than other characters. And I thought Woody Harrelson was a really interesting choice to play him. And I think he nailed like the creepiness of Cletus, of the guy behind Carnage, of Cletus Cassidy. The movie's a little bit shorter, which does kind of play like a highlight reel at times, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, ooh, a 97-minute superhero movie. That's like, I feel like I'll have a whole night ahead of me after that, even after I watch it. Cause usually it feels like after I watch a 3-hour Marvel movie, sometimes it's like 1 a.m. or something. And I'm like, oh man, I gotta get up in a few hours. So that was kind of fun, but also a little bit different. But ultimately, I think they lean into the Odd Couple kind of vibe with Tom Hardy and Venom. And I think as a comedy, it works really well.
Yeah, I mean, interesting that you mentioned, at the end about it being a comedy, because I think it's comedy first. I think it's definitely a comedy first.
Yep.
And I think it had to be in the intention because there's so many little elements that kind of lean you in that direction. Even if you see the like buddy cop element, and this kind of, I'm no buddy cop expert, but from a lot of the buddy cop movies that I've seen, and I think about like your Lethal Weapons or your like Rush Hours, that they usually will anchor, they'll have the comedy, which they'll like anchor with your lead heroes, and they will ground it in reality and give it in like a complementary serious path by having a serious villain. And so it'll be like the really serious villain who will like do away with one of the characters that the main, characters know, and, proves that they're bad and they're serious. And even though there's like jokes throughout, like it usually then results in kind of a more serious like ending and takedown of this serious villain. Of course, obviously I'm using a generalization, but the point I'm trying to make here is that this doesn't do that. This has your leads in comedic roles, being like, Venom and Eddie Brock, and so they have their back and forth. And so there's a ton of comedy there. And then Cletus is also, you know, I mean, and Woody Harrelson is playing him like he's a villain in a Joel Schumacher Batman movie. And but he's dressed like that. So it's not like Woody Harrelson was going off, you know, was going off of the script or the plan that that Andy Serkis and the team had in mind. Like they wanted him to be over the top. They dressed him over the top. Like this was like he is playing basically they're all cartoon characters, and it is more of a comedy than it is meant to be taken seriously. And I think that tone is a little jarring and it could be jarring, I would say. I don't think it bothered me that much, but I can imagine it could be jarring for other people. And it's certainly tonally different and leaning more towards the comedic end than the first one. The first one's not as funny.
Yeah, I feel like that was something like the first one was so financially successful and such a box office smash. And I feel like they were trying to figure out, almost like they were figuring it out as they went along. And then for this one, Tom Hardy, who I know is like a major kind of creative force behind these movies, he was kind of like, here's what I really want to lean into this is what really resonated with people. And I don't know if that was, you know, through the test screenings or just his preference or whatnot, but I think he just gets such a kick out of the slapstick part of it. And like for him, I think it's so much fun to embrace like the quirkiness of the Venom storyline, because you could look at this as like, whether you're looking at the comic book source material that Venom's been involved with, or like if like Christopher Nolan had made this like a trilogy, like they could go so dark with it, and it could be really good as a storyline where it's like those 90s comic books that were so dark and like really push boundaries, because the subject matter, I mean, you know, Cletus Cassidy is a very complex, dark character, and that's something that you could really lean into. But like you said, they kind of have decided to go this other way with it, and I think it's a little more accessible and marketable to go this way. And obviously, they made so much money on the first one. They're like, well, let's just do even more of that kind of comedy and see how it goes. And it'll be, you know, with COVID and everything like that, I think I'm not really sure how it'll play out with the financial success of this one, but it's been interesting to see the direction they've gone.
I think it surpassed the original Venom. It's done really well.
Wow.
And you know, and it does talk about how it speaks to how much people love Venom and love Carnage. I mean, comedy aside, like me seeing Carnage, you know, in quasi real life, was spectacular. I'm like, oh my God, like he looks great. Like that's how I that's how I pictured, you know, him from the comic book. And like the CG effects that they applied to Carnage were excellent. I mean, they just did such a great job with it. I mean, I loved the effects. I loved how he moved. I mean, he looked great. I mean, there are different ways to bring these characters to life. We saw with Venom, right? You saw Spider-Man 3, right? Venom didn't look very good. He looked better in the first Venom movie, but I actually think they changed Venom's look a little bit in this one. He looks closer to the Ryan Stegman version, which is the more recent. They just released a new Venom series, which Stegman's not on, but Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman did the game-changing Venom series that ran over the last number of years. And if you haven't read it, you know, I know there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I love Venom, and like you might like us. Like, I mean, I've been reading Venom comics since I've been alive, basically, and you know, and grew up on, you know, Maximum Carnage, both the comic book series, you know, and the video game, and everything else. But man, like Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman, they redefined Venom, and that is some of the stuff that Tom Hardy and the team are playing with, and they're not connecting all the dots yet, but you can see those influences, and there's a lot more where Venom can go. One of the things that's interesting about this, and we're going to dive into some spoilers here. This is our last topic, and you know, I think it's an interesting one to talk about. It's been out for a little bit, so just heads up to our listeners. But I feel like this was made this was designed kind of like a pilot episode for what we can see in the future. This, while it introduces Carnage and is a fun story, it's actually has no consequence potentially on Venom's future. And you can bring him in, as we saw with some post-credit stuff. You could bring him into the MCU, and based on the way, try not to give all the details out for people like, I still want to listen. Due to how Carnage is disposed of, we know that not gone. There's completely new ways that you can take that symbiote and you could potentially move it into the MCU. So I have to wonder if, and again, it's just speculation because I don't know anything. But you have to wonder if they didn't know exactly where the new Spider-Man movie was going to wind up, or the MCU. We just heard that they're going to do another 3 movies with Tom Holland. That may have not been a given. That partnership with Marvel and Sony may have not been solidified. You want to make a good Venom movie, but you also want to make one that leaves you open to go in different directions. Well, this movie is completely satisfying and a fun entry. It doesn't do anything dramatically different to any of the characters. At the end of the day, the characters are where they are, and you can bring back Venom, Carnage, all these characters. You can bring them back. You can have a new actor play Cletus because you have, if we're talking MCU and you're talking about the stuff they're doing with Loki and the variants, you can have other ones. And we know Spider-Man No Way Home that we see Norman Osborn is back. He's dead in one universe. He's back in another. Otto Octavius died in Spider-Man 2. We see him back. Is he that Spider-Man 2 Octavius? I think he's actually probably another universe's Octavius is more likely. And so my big question, leaving Venom, as like I said, enjoying it, but now I'm looking at it, I'm like, I think they set it up so that they can just move Venom into the MCU and they could move Carnage if they wanted to as well. And just put in another Cletus Cassidy, or just revive Venom, or revive Carnage if they wanted to. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think with Doctor Strange being involved in the new Spider-Man, and obviously all the speculation about Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield potentially coming in, and then we've already seen that, hey, we're getting these villains from the Sam Raimi movies coming back, which is like, I feel like we're in an alternate universe, because
and the Mark Webb movies, because we're getting Jamie Foxx's Electro. Yep. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and it looks like he will be a major part of it as well, with the just the factor of the electricity. I mean, there's so many ways that can be utilized, and Sandman, and I'm sorry if anyone listening hasn't seen the trailers or has somehow avoided the speculation.
We did throw a spoiler warning up there.
That is true. And then on top of that, Sam Raimi is directing the new Doctor Strange movies. So I feel like we're getting like a new, like we're living in an alternate universe than we were 15 years ago from when the first, or the Raimi Spider-Man movies were coming out. But yeah, I feel like it's only natural if Sony and Marvel can keep this kind of relationship going, that we see Venom cross over. And I think the bigger question is, like, how will Spider-Man fit into the future of the Marvel universe? Like, do they want to kind of keep him at kind of in his own corner of that world, or is he still going to be like mixing up with the new Avengers? Or, if him and Venom, like, they have so much going on in just the Spider-Man world, I feel like they could do 3 movies in the Sony universe, or in that part of the universe, and still be successful. So I think pretty much anything's possible at this point, and we'll know a lot more on December 16th when the new Spider-Man movie comes out. I think that will tell us like what direction they're going to go in, and the after credits tease of Let There Be Carnage let us know a lot about where Venom stands in the whole universe, Marvel universe as well. So I'm just really curious where, like, when the dust settles at the end of No Way Home, where will Peter Parker be? And in relation to that, where will Venom be? And I think it's only a matter of time before they cross paths, like, in a major way.
I mean, the thing about the post credits of the movie is, like, I mean, it's clearly there to move him into the MCU. So it's like, when are you doing it? Like, are you doing it? Are you going to do it in No Way Home? Or are you going to do it in another movie? I think that's more of the question. I think there's no question now it's going to happen. I don't think it wasn't a tease as like a, hey, we may do this. It's like, we're doing it. It's just a matter of how are they going to do it? And they may have already decided. So we might know in a couple of weeks, or we might have to wait a few years.
I know I'm paraphrasing here, but I know Tom Hardy was kind of asked about that, and to paraphrase him, he basically was like, well, we'd be stupid not to be excited about that opportunity, or something along those lines of like, hey, that's something I would definitely be excited about. And so you could kind of tell he's open to the idea of that. Like, he's not like trying to be like, no, Venom's, because I know he's a major factor behind what they do with Venom right now. And I feel like he wants to go, he would be totally game to go and play around in that universe and cross paths with Peter Parker. And I mean, at the end of the day, like, you think Spider-Man, Venom's like the kind of, I think, has become the first like anti-hero or villain that you think of. I mean, Green Goblin's definitely up there. Doc Ock is up there, of course, but I think Venom is such an iconic looking character that at some point you can't keep doing Spider-Man without introducing Venom again to some extent. So it's only a matter of time. And
my guess is, in Tom Hardy's dream world, that he's doing King in Black. King in Black just ended the Donny Cates, Ryan Stegman comic book series, and it ended the Venom storyline with a story that rivals the scale of Infinity War. It's big.
Wow.
And it's massive. And so it's basically, Null, which is like the god of the symbiotes, awakens and comes to take over the earth. And he doesn't come alone. And the Avengers, all the Marvel heroes, have to try to fight him off. And in the end, Venom's the only one that can do it. But you do see, like, kind of like when the Chitauri came, you do see like an Avengers style fight against Null and his forces. And so I'm like, I would love to see this as a movie. I'm thinking I'm being a little unrealistic with this, that they're actually gonna go all in with it. But man, it would be fun. So, and honestly, I think Tom Hardy's probably saying the same thing, because there's no way he's not reading this, just based on, like I said, what I know he's been reading, or what I know they've been pulling in for the movies. And again, to me, it's the most interesting and game changing stuff they've done with the comic book series to date. So I think whatever they do, moving forward, if they have their way, will be heavily informed by it.
Interesting. Yeah. It's super interesting to see where they go from here. And then just the fact that they're even, tying in stuff from previous Spider-Man movies is such a thing to wrap your head around in the first place. So I think it just shows that anything is possible. And, I think Tom Hardy's becoming more of a Venom super fan, if he wasn't already. And, so I'll just be curious to see where they go with that. And then looking at like Morbius, which is coming out early next year, it looks like I don't know, like, necessarily how many connections there will be, but from the looks of that new trailer, I think we're going to see even more kind of MCU connections, and Sony's kind of branching off into that world that we know from the previous MCU movies, even more so now. And I don't know if that was reshoots or whatnot, but I feel like they're kind of doubling down on like, yes, we're all connected, and this is the sandbox for playing, and pretty much anything is possible. So really curious to see where they go with that as well, because I think that'll kind of clue us into the future of Spider-Man and Venom, because obviously Morbius is a very interesting character in that world as well. Another one that we saw in the animated series, which they really touched on a lot of those comic book characters. So curious to see where they go in that movie too.
Yeah. I mean, it's lots of good stuff. I mean, I love Batman. I love Spider-Man. It's a little bit of a toss up. It depends on the day, you ask me. I mean, like I said, I think I read more Spider-Man than I read Batman when I was, growing up. When I was, I'd walk to my comic book shop from grade school every day, pick up, whatever. They had the Clone Saga going on back in the day.
Oh man.
They had the Clone Saga, which ended in Maximum Clonage. I still have them. I have all the Clone Saga comics. I have Maximum Clonage with Alpha and Omega, when they were doing the special covers and stuff like that. Yeah, it's interesting because
the shiny covers. It's
interesting how much people are like, I was reading, there was some, I don't know who put it up, but whether it was like an article by someone, who really knows Spider-Man well, or whether it was a poll. It was like top Spider-Man storylines, and Maximum Clonage was on it. I'm like, people remember things differently than I do. I remember not a lot of people liking the Clone Saga, back when I was growing up and read it. But if you liked it and you love it, great. And it does show how, people, how opinions of things change over time. It's kind of like when the Thing and The Shining first came out, people, they were kind of panned, and then it found an audience. So, clearly, the Clone Saga has as well. And Ben Reilly's back. Ben Reilly is back as a Spider-Man in the comic book. So, yeah, I mean, anyway, there's a lot of great Spider-Man stuff. We could have a whole podcast about Spider-Man. We may have to follow up to talk No Way Home. But yeah, I think it's time to wrap this one up. Derek, it was great catching up with you. Glad you enjoyed. I mean, I think with all of this, the good news is, like, everything we talked about, like, we enjoyed. Sometimes it's like, we didn't like that. But I'm glad you've been enjoying World Beyond, and you enjoyed Ghostbusters, and and we'll be back to talk about more soon. We want to thank Brian, our engineer, for helping us out every single episode. And as always, we want to thank our listeners, including those of you who have signed up for a Corpse Club membership. Make sure to visit corpseclub.com. You can check out our latest episode, our backlog of episodes, and you can sign up to become a member. Don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Every rating and review really helps. You can find us on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcast providers. If you want to get in touch, you can reach out. We're at contact@corpseclub.com, or on Twitter. We always like to hear from you. We're at Daily Dead News. We're at Corpse Club. And on Instagram and Facebook, we're under Corpse Club as well. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, stay scary.